Hey everyone, and welcome to Shakespeare. That either probably has a lot of you really, really excited. Some of you might be groaning, like, oh no, not again. And some of you might be like, oh my gosh, I really hate Shakespeare. That's okay. Usually by now, y'all would have read at least Romeo and Juliet. My daughter read it in eighth grade, so I'm assuming that y'all have read that one at least by now. Maybe a little bit of some Julius Caesar, maybe Hamlet or whatnot, but we are going to do Othello. Othello is probably one of my favorite Shakespearean tragedies. Um, it follows the general characteristic of Shakespearean tragedies where most people die at the end. That's how you know it's a tragedy. Romeo and Juliet's like the weird exception where it actually starts with more of Shakespeare's comedic formula and then slowly transforms to a tragedy, which makes it just a lot of, I wouldn't say fun, because it's a very sad play at the end. But Othello definitely follows more of that kind of traditional tragic formula of a Shakespeare play that y'all have probably already experienced. So, to kind of introduce us to Shakespeare, I thought I would show y'all some pictures from when I went to the Globe Theatre in London a few years ago. And they've got a wonderful exhibit. That's what you're looking here, right here. It's a a model of the Globe Theatre stage. A lot of Shakespeare's plays were performed at the Globe. It burned to the ground, I think it was 1613, during a performance of Henry VIII. And ironically enough, it was because of the pyrotechnics, but later when they rebuilt the Globe Theatre, the globe, if you look right here, kind of where this cursor is, it has a thatched roof. It's the only thatched roof allowed in London. And when they were actually performing Henry VIII, they set off a cannon and set the roof on fire again. But thank goodness, due to modern fire protection, they were able to save the modern globe. But it's really neat because they have a lot of artifacts in the globe that kind of show what they used to do in order to like make the sound effects and whatnot. And here's an example of one of them. And Summer, who is a professor at Cumberland University, given the storm machine a whirl. And this is part of the exhibit. They have costumes, they have props from the plays that they've used. It's a really neat place. If you ever go to London, I highly recommend a little visit to the Globe Theatre to see what they have. I'm going to show you some artifacts from Julius Caesar if any of you have done Julius Caesar in the past. Got the SPQR banner in the background. Lots of fun stuff. Got some Elizabethan dress. This is actually a recreation of one of the dresses that one of the actors wore when they opened the recreated globe. And it took, I think they said weeks to make because they made it exactly the way they would have made it during Elizabethan times. Hold on one second. Let me see if I can get to a few pictures. All right. Here is the globe stage as it looks now from a higher vantage point. Those are my friends. I went on a girls' trip. It was a bunch of us. This is actually what's really neat is that's the ceiling of the globe stage. So you can't really see it if you're sitting in one of the benches that circle in the stage. But if you're down on the ground level and you look up, then you can actually see the absolutely gorgeously painted ceiling of the Globe Theater stage. And here's a that. Just to kind of give you an idea of the size and scope of the actual Globe Theater. Right. Maybe one more. See, I had one from the balcony right here. And this is what your vantage point would look like if you were in the audience. So in the it costs more money obviously to sit in one of these seats, but if even if you did not have a lot of money, you were more than welcome pay a penny and you got to go right down here around the stage. And one thing they told me, and I'm not sure if it's true or not, maybe it was just the Globe Theater staff trying to pull some American tales there, but they said they used to have buckets on ground level that people would pee in. And then at the end of the plays, they would collect the urine because the ammonia was really important in helping to preserve dye in clothing or something like that. It was used in the dye process. And so they would take the pee collected from the playgoers to give to like cloth makers or something like that. It was really, really interesting. I've always wanted to like verify that fact, but I just think it's kind of gross yet cool at the same time if it is a true story. It was really neat. While we were there, we actually, I don't have more videos because they actually started an actual play rehearsal while we were there. And so I wasn't able to like get a full, like, as many videos as I wanted to. But as I said, really, really neat place. Very historic. They tried to make it as historically accurate as they possibly could. So when you're reading through Othello, just try to imagine it being performed on a stage like this, because this is exactly how it would have been performed during Shakespeare's time at the Globe Theater. Anyway, just a neat experience. As I said, if you go to London, take a minute to go to the Globe Theater. It's right beside the Tate Modern Museum of Art, which that's a whole other interesting story. If you're really into modern art, cool. If you're not, yeah, then I understand. But Othello is really interesting because this is like one of the few times we actually see race kind of being introduced into one of Shakespeare's plays. And the thing of it is, a lot of people were like, well, there were no black people in England during this time. Well, that's not true. When Catherine of Aragon married Henry VIII, which was Elizabeth I's father, she actually did bring with her some black servants. And then there have been people of African descent in England periodically throughout the ages. It's just that they were usually not of the nobility, and so we don't really have a lot of records of those. And there's some more of that in your discussion that we'll get into. So it's not that people during Shakespeare's time would have never seen a person of color or know what a Moor was. Now, a Moor had a very negative connotation because you have to look at the historical context. During that time period, the Moors and the Spanish were at war frequently. The Moors kept trying to take over Spain. They would for a little while. Spain would push them back into Africa. And it was a conflict that was going on for ages. And, you know, Othello's definitely not painted in a good light, but you also have to consider that during this time period of Shakespeare's time, Queen Mary the First, she was queen right before Elizabeth the First, or sorry, yeah, it was Mary the First. She was married to one of her Spanish cousins. Her mother was Catherine of Aragon, who was Spanish and brought with her some Moors that had been captured and had stayed in Spain. And so it was very political, you know, this whole idea of a person of Moorish descent or whatnot. But they were living in England. People in England probably would have come across them, especially in a city like London. There were not a lot of people of African descent, but they were there. They did exist, and that's something that people don't know and don't realize. But on a much different note, I did want to show you. With Shakespeare, Shakespeare can be difficult. The language is very difficult. English language is a very, very interesting animal in that it is constantly evolving and changing. We are constantly adding new words. It's half Germanic, it's half Latin based, and that's partially because of the French. So in 1066, you had a French man who came over and took over England, and for about 300 or 400 years, the main language of the English court was actually French. They did not speak English. And then a few years, about 100 years before Shakespeare, you had the 100 Years' War between France and England, and England started speaking English as their main language at court, which that English looked nothing like the English from 500 years before that. And we are now, several hundred years past Shakespeare, so it's no wonder that our language has evolved and changed. And so sometimes it can be very, very difficult to read. So I do recommend possibly watching a version of the play, and I'm going to show you where there is a lovely free version on MTSU. So if you go to Quick Links, and then you go to Library, and then go to Library Services, click on Distance Learners, and then let's see, where is it? Streaming Videos. And if you scroll down, we have all sorts of stuff. Y'all are welcome to look at this anytime you want. But we do have Ambrose Video Shakespeare Plays. Yay! So you click on that, and most of the time it comes up. Sometimes it takes a minute. Oh, and it will ask for your login. I'm already logged in, so that's why it's not asking me. So it's just your MTSU credentials, your email address, and your password, and whatever that is. And that's not going to work. So I'm going to show you what it looks like when it does pull up, because I'd already pulled it up. It has got 39 Shakespeare plays. So if you go down and scroll down through here, there is Othello. And then you can just click Watch Video. And again, it's being a little bit stubborn on my end right now. But it will pull up, just trust me on it. There it is. Click on that, and it is a TV version of Othello done by the BBC, and it's very, very, close to. Another thing that I recommend, which don't tell people I've recommended this, so if you go to Amazon and you do No Fear Shakespeare Othello, right here, these are really cool because it actually has the more modern day English alongside the, I don't know if it actually has a sample here. I don't think it does. No. But what it does is when you pull it up, it's side by side. So on one side, it will have the Shakespeare, and on the other side, it will have our. I love how it says plain English, but it's just modern English, or modern, the way we would talk. So if you're having a little bit of trouble with the Shakespeare, I highly recommend maybe getting this. You can get a Kindle. If you have a phone, you can download the Kindle app, which is free. It's $4.99 on Kindle. The paperback, is like $6.50. I don't know how long it would take to get in, but if you are having trouble with the Shakespearean language, then I highly recommend that. So there will be more in discussions and in your asynchronous assignment for this week, but as always, if you have any questions, never hesitate to ask.